Tim, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Greetings from England. We just started lockdown today, so it's
Yeah,
fun and games.
yeah, yeah. You guys have, yeah, you guys
What's
have
it like in
the
Riyadh?
second wave.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Riyadh is fine.
yeah. So, any restrictions or anything like
Riyadh is
that?
fine. We just masks and social distancing. That's about it.
Okay, okay, good stuff. Long may it last. I've noticed that I seem to be having some network issues on my side, so audience, forgive us while we try to get through these technical difficulties with the internet connection. I just want to say that I met Tim as part of the LESS community, Large Scale Scrum, also known as LESS. And there's a candidate trainer group there and very good conversations about agility. So even if you're not, if you're interested in other things as well as LESS, it's really, really interesting. It's kind of like it's kind of like a Top Gun of agility, really. It kind of feels like that sometimes. Really, some really good, strong characters there. How long have you been in the LESS community, Tim?
I'd say since around 2016. Bus, I spoke to Bus that I was interested in becoming a trainer, and then he let me in. We had a previous relationship on a number of Scrum groups. So so after speaking with Bus, he let me in, and it's been awesome. Like you said, those guys there's some really awesome candidate trainers and trainers in the LESS community. So
Yeah,
it's been great.
absolutely. So I'm curious because I saw one of your previous talks. Do you do stuff beyond LESS as well? Are there other things that you're into beyond? Like, so I met you in the LESS community, for example, but you involved in other communities as well. So are there other aspects of agility that you're also into, or LESS your main area?
Yeah, so LESS is kind of, LESS, as you know, is kind of a I wouldn't say it's a catch-all, but it's it's very broad, right? So
Yeah,
so for me, there's a lot of lean startup coaching that I do that is basically LESS, because it's multiple team kind of lean startup type coaching that I do quite a bit of executive coaching, right? So senior level executives, a lot of startups, a lot of people, that type of stuff.
I've just noticed here that getting a couple of comments, and Saleh is saying that the sound is echoing. So if other people could just let us know if they're having an echo sound experience. In theory, we shouldn't have any echo experience because both Tim and I are using earbuds. So it wouldn't really be a kind of reaction there. So if you just let us know, we'd appreciate that. Thank you. So can you tell us a bit about yourself, Tim? So you kind of started a little bit, right? So how did you get involved in all of this agility stuff?
Yeah, so I started around 2007. Started I was working for a startup, and we were doing a lot of XP, right? So we were doing so it's probably a bit earlier than probably around 2005, 2006. So we were doing a lot of XP, and then then we started getting into some Scrum. Started transitioning. So we still had the XP on the engineering side, but on the kind of on the method side, we were mostly doing Scrum, right? So then I started a company. We were a small web company doing a lot of kind of rapid development, mostly with Scrum teams and XP as well. And that kind of expanded quite a bit, and I ended up getting a call in Saudi Arabia to come to a project in Saudi Arabia, and then 2007, 2008, 2007, I moved to Saudi, and that company started to grow quite a bit, and we were taking on government projects in Saudi, and so that was mostly web-based agility. So my specialties in the digital space, kind of web and mobile and things like that. So I'd say 2006, 2005 XP, 2006 Scrum, and ever since I've been doing some variant of Scrum, Kanban, XP, and obviously less various. I did a less adoption in 2010 that I didn't know was less, obviously, where we had multiple Scrum teams doing the largest or the most famous government portal in the country in Saudi Arabia. It's by far and away the most the most trafficked government portal in the country.
So is it mostly government work that you do, Tim?
No, I do a lot of startup work, a lot of government work, a lot of kind of semi-government work. So what's big here is kind of triple P type government, semi-government, public-private partnerships. Whereby these private entities are delivering services for free and making money by charging for additional value-added services. So I deal over web with government services. So I do quite a bit of that and quite a bit of startup coaching.
Okay. And there's an expression I hadn't heard of today until you mentioned it to me, the Gulf Cooperation Council. Is that kind of like it's like a unity of a number of states together, isn't it? But would it be metaphorically the equivalent of the EU for the Gulf states, or?
So I would say it's similar to it would be similar to the EU states. Yeah. So I would say it's very much similar, and so there's kind of free travel between the various Gulf states, and and there's I wouldn't say borderless travel, but it's kind of the people go between the borders pretty. They have they have methods by which they facilitate the movement of people between the various cities or the various countries in the GCC.
Okay, so it's like you've got less friction with trade. So does that mean you spend a lot of time outside of Saudi Arabia than in those other states?
So I don't as much anymore, obviously, with COVID. I used to do quite a bit of stuff in the Emirates, in UAE, Dubai, these areas. So even the company that I'm one of the co-founders, we're really established in the Emirates. But the majority of business, from a business perspective, kind of Saudi Gulf, kind of if you compare Saudi versus the rest of the GCC, you'd say Saudi is all of the GCC combined from a business perspective.
Right. Yeah. Okay, understood. So you mentioned that you do startup coaching. Like, what kind of startups are you talking about here? Can you give me a few examples? I mean,
So in the past, I've worked with various startups. Probably the largest food delivery startup that's owned by, well, it's not really a startup, but it was at one point. Now it's one of the largest food delivery apps in the country. I've worked with a number of kind of a travel startup, for example. So it was a rapidly growing book, like if you can think of a booking.com for the region, or the expedia.com for the region. So these type of, and then smaller people just getting started out, just that are that are getting started and starting generating revenue. So those type of companies, and doing a lot of coaching and advisory work with them.
Okay, and what would you say your sweet spot is? Like when you give advice, is there particular type of content that you kind of zone in on? Like, would it be agility? Is it business? Is it general?
So I would say it's scaling business. So I would say it's not just at the team level, but kind of scaling from, you have a small company and you want to take it to the next level, from business modeling to revenue streams to partnerships to all of these type of things, along with being able to deliver and align that across the organization. So that's where generally my sweet spot is. So. And that's not just, it might be a 50-person company or a 600-person company. So, but generally that's where my sweet spot is, looking at the business and seeing how you could kind of maximize the value you can generate from that business based on your core set of portfolio products and services. Some of them even do, for example, professional services. So product services and kind of projects, I guess is the proper term, but professional service delivery type services. And then, in one of the companies I work with now, so the company I work with now does all three. They have kind of, so a product-based hosting type service, so like a cloud-based hosting type service, all the way to project delivery they have, and they have obviously products, and then products through partnerships, through these public-private partnerships. So these are the type of things I kind of look at the business, what the goals of the business are, and how you can do that kind of in a lean way. So if you want to think about if you call it business agility now, obviously, but it's kind of being able to make the business more lean and more aligned and able to deliver for their customers.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that you talk about Agile and product development. And one of the things that I've noticed about the communities is that there's a little bit of a schism. You've got the product management people, and you've got the kind of the Agile folks, and even within the Agile community, there's a bit of a split as well. Between, you can get a business agility through the Agile manifesto, or you can, do it through some other ways. And some people are trying to make the two of them kind of work together, of course. What have you noticed, Tim? Have you noticed any of that yourself?
Yeah, I've noticed, because the quote unquote Agile folks specifically focus on practices that are very specific to the engineering side, right? So those practices being very specific to engineering, there's not a lot of elaboration of, good product management. What is product excellence? What is product leadership? And so there's not a lot of great understanding. So even when I ask guys about, okay, what type of metrics are you tracking at your organization, they're still giving me, kind of, there's very few business metrics that they mentioned, right? So and for a product person, that just doesn't work. So if you look at kind of some of the lean startup type metrics, like on acquisition, or referral or shit. So if you're thinking about business from a product perspective, to me the Agile community seems to be, well, a lot of the Agile community seems to be still really stuck in kind of engineering, which is exceptional, and obviously that's really important, and that's where the heart of what you're doing for the business is. But there definitely is a lot to be learned on the product side.
Yeah, just for just addressing the comments there, Tim. People are asking, can we chat? Yeah, people can submit questions for Tim or for myself, or comments. So feel free to do that, and we'll interrupt the conversation between myself and Tim to address directly with your questions. But just for now, just on that, I've noticed this as well, Tim, and I managed to kind of bring it together in a sense, because really, in terms of product management, a lot of the focus is around experimentation, isn't it? And being much more customer-centric and really understanding what the customers are really looking for. And I particularly love Lean UX. I'm a bit of a fan of that. Design thinking as well, of course, Lean Startup, but kind of more of a fan of Lean UX, kind of nice simple framework that's easy to apply, and you can run the cheap experiments to figure out you're on the right track. So you can kind of build up some evidence, and then you can, once you get harder evidence, you can kind of maybe engineer it or whatever. But one of the things that bothers me is in a lot of companies, they have these kind of like design groups who kind of design product or whatever, and then they do this kind of, it's almost like a big design up front, and they hand it off to the scrum teams then, so to speak, to kind of do it over 18 months, which kind of makes a bit of a mockery of the whole thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. So it's one of the things I keep mentioning to some of the product people that I know. Right. So if you want to if you want to think about this kind of more holistically, right, and think about there's only so much someone can design without having everyone involved. Because just you don't have the background, right? So what are the possibilities? What are all of the possibilities that are out there? And if you don't have the actual technical background or contextual background to be able to even imagine additional things, then it's limiting. So.
Yeah, indeed. I think Tim is having a kind of a connection problem at the moment, so with some of the comments. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Tim, we can hear you, but I think your connection is it's a bit flaky at the moment. So
Yeah,
I'll address some of the comments if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So Mike Levins came in with so Snow Hunter says, can you ask questions? Yes, you can, of course. That's the whole idea. So Mike Levins has a question, Tim. So have you had much experience allowing teams to almost bypass product owners and interface directly with the customer? Thanks, Mike. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, so I don't think bypassing product owners is healthy, but I think in involving teams with so there are two aspects, right? So if you're in a large scale setup, right? So large scale setup, probably a product owner is not going to be as involved, right? So if you're in a very large scale setup, then yes, I would imagine that would be the case, because the product owner is going to be really at a probably not able to be in all of those sessions, right? So the teams have to be able to facilitate and do all the things that they need to do to get the insights from customers, right? So practically, I haven't been in a setup that's that large. Okay, the largest one I've been in, where we're probably 7 to 8 teams, but the product owner is definitely not directing. The product owner is engaging with the teams and also helping with and understanding along with the teams, and product owners are there to just kind of think about and understand priority. But like I said, I would imagine in a much larger setup, absolutely, that would just be nearly impossible. Or either the product owner might delegate to from a less context, right? That's an area product owner. But there would be someone on the product side, because those people still need context. But giving the teams greater control over that interaction, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that was one of the light bulb moments that when I went to Basfada's 3-day certified electrician class, and he said the product owner does not clarify requirements, and I should have known that anyway. But it was like, okay, so I said, who does that? And the team, right? He said, well, the product owner introduces the team to the customers and the end users, and they get each other out and fly all day, right? Of course, that leads to another problem, doesn't it? But you can contain it. Well, okay, you can clarify A, B, C, but if they ask about X, Y, Z, say that's a very good question, but you need to ask me, the product owner. You can clarify those ones. You know? What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, so 1% Ghost is asking, in what way do you manage overlapping iterations?
Yeah.
I generally run for the same product, the same cadence. So
yeah.
Can you clarify a bit?
I think I can address that question. Okay. Because 1% Ghost, I think what you might be meaning here is the kind of overlap of fermentation and developing the product. 1% Ghost, if you just let us know if that's what you're actually talking about. Because what you can actually do is, this is one of the lovely things of the Scrum.org Scrum at UX workshop. What they do is they teach you to basically, you can have experiments on the product backlog. You can have hypotheses in the product backlog, you can have problem statements. And the team might prioritize in some sprints to do more experiments than usual, because maybe we don't need to lose our shirt on this product. Maybe it's we need to figure out if we got the right personas in the first place, or got the right problem that we need to fix. Is it a problem that even needs to be fixed, or even if it is, will the customer even pay for it? You know, they like it, but maybe they want it for free. You know, so if that's what you mean, 1% Ghost, Scrum.org's Scrum UX is very good at arting how you do that. But there's also a great book called Lean UX, and essentially this is designed as well as, unless you're supposed to have a cross-functional team, which also means that you'd have UX, UI folks on the team, right? So, and they can teach other people on the team to do all things UX as well. So, kind of interesting topic. It's often misunderstood how that's actually done. Have you had much experience with that, where you had to kind of mix experimentation with, some ideas you're not so sure they're a bit risky, so you need to run some experiments, and others where we've got loads of evidence, we should just build it, and just try to blend that.
Yeah, but I mean, generally we do it. You know, like I said, it's not an overlapping iteration; it's at the same cadence. So think of it this way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So you know, one team is off experimenting with something, and trying to get more insights, right? With it, and you know, 2 or 3 teams might be working on work that you have clarity on, right? So to me, that's generally how you would handle that.
Totally agree, and that's where the illusion comes in, because if they're using Scrum, for example, they can have one sprint when they can iterate. They can do all that experimentation build at the same time. Everyone's going at the same cadence. But you could have a Kanban board showing 3 time horizons. You could have what things do we need to do experiments on, what stuff do we actually need to build, and what stuff do we deliver before that we need to go back and check with the customer if actually there was any value there, if it was really any good idea. So, but everybody's still working in the same sprint. It's just that they're concerned about the 3 time horizons, is how I put it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've got a big comment here from steve@.com. So let me try. It's getting truncated, so I'll read it for the audience. Actually, this is a great example, because Restream.io didn't believe me that my messages were getting truncated. So thank you very much, Steve, for giving me a brilliant example. So I'll read the question for everybody. So would you say a bit about your experience of company culture in the GCC region, as far as it relates to introducing agile practices? Great question. My impression is that companies in the region lean towards command and control and deep hierarchies, perhaps more so than Europe, so making agile a difficult thing to introduce, but also, I guess, impactful when it works out. Thanks, Steve.
So great question. So absolutely, culture. This was one of the things I used to argue with Bess about a lot. For those that don't know Bess, you know, we used to. So when I first started, when I was first, experimenting with Scrum, I was kind of a bit concerned about because you're talking about I was working with international teams that were that was 2006, 2007, that were very where command and control was very entrenched in the culture specifically, right? And I asked him, I said, I mean, how on earth can you ever get these guys to get out of this yes sir, no sir, kind of command and control, very hierarchical. And I just thought there's no, we used to go back and forth, and when he goes back and forth, he's quite funny, and and so I used to be one of those non-believers that it can't work in certain cultures. So he had started actually doing some research on Scrum and various culture settings because of the nature of the actual culture. So absolutely, I'm a firm believer that culture plays a strong, it just plays a strong role in being able to adopt things more rapidly, right? Especially Agile, where you have to have the teams give you, think on their own and take direction themselves. So that's definitely been the case. However, there's been massive changes in the region. From when I got here in 2007 to 2020 now, I mean, the skill set of the people has drastically improved. The ability to speak up when, the whole millennial developer generation is just, it didn't escape the GCC, right? So it did not escape, right? Because you've got the internet, you've got media, you've got all of these various things that have drastically changed the culture inside of organizations. They are still hierarchical. However, the CEO talks to people that are at the lowest rung of the organization, because there has to be this back and forth between the senior leadership and those people actually doing the work. So while they do still have this, strong hierarchy in titles, it's much less so in actual implementation or application. So is it perfect? No, absolutely not. Is it slow moving? Yes, but it's improved dramatically, and you can tell by the just overall digitization of the country. I mean, or all of the countries actually in the GCC.
So I'm just curious, Tim, do you get involved in startups then just to keep your sanity?
So that's a good question. The startup cultures are very, very different. They're very similar to the cultures I was used to in the States. So no, and no, because some of the companies, while they are while they are slower to adopt, they're still great companies. I mean, they still have some great cultural aspects, and just the nature of the culture itself is pretty interesting. I mean, it's a very different experience than I had in the States, but some things about it I love. So I've been here 13 years, so one would adapt.
Yeah, sorry, cultures no matter where I go anyway. But honest, so it's difficult no matter where you're going. Great question, though. Thank you. There's another one here from Ghazi. I'll just throw up here. Thank you, Ghazi, for another example of a question that gets truncated from YouTube. So I've got 2 bug reports now for Restreamio. So thank you so much for that. I'll read it over to Tim. So how would you approach and educate clients who follow more traditional project management and urge the benefits of Agile? It's great. It's a very good follow-up question to the previous one.
Yeah, and that's a great question, Ghazi. So generally and it does kind of come to Steve's question. For me, it's always been about showing instead of saying. Okay, so whenever I go into a place, they think whatever you're saying is pretty crazy and revolutionary and so on and so forth. But here, especially in the GCC, especially in Saudi, talk is cheap. There's a lot of talk. They've been hit by every single thing that's been in the West has been here, right? So all of the methods, all of the certifications. So it's almost like information overload, and they've been inundated with this stuff. So then you just have to show results. And so what I mean by show results is, get a backlog, get a product backlog, get a team or a couple of teams working, and deliver in 2 weeks. Okay, so it really is that simple. And every place I've gone, what has shown the most impact and what's made them start to listen and think is the actual result, right? So so that's generally what happens. And so now, honestly, Ghazi, I've developed a reputation in the country to be able to now, having seen that, people seeing that being done over and over and over again, to where people are just more willing to listen. So that more willingness to listen, or that trust, is because like I said, we've gotten teams on the ground, get a backlog, prioritize that backlog, and deliver something valuable after 2 weeks.
That's a really good achievement. I was in a meeting room a couple of years ago, and there was a load of McKinsey consultants in the room. No disrespect, they were very good consultants. They're very good at what they did. But it's always very funny what happened, because I was talking to the client about something, exact same thing that McKinsey were telling the client. But because it was McKinsey, and because it was, who am I anyway? But it looks like you have that brand already. You've built up that reputation where when you say something that the client believes you, right?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been through a lot of hard work, but I'd say I built up quite a good reputation. I mean, some people hate it. I mean, honestly. So I remember I was talking to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and we were delivering a project, that Porto I told you about, and he was asking if something could be done in, I think, a month or something, and I being the straightforward guy I am, I said, no way possible, right? So I said, no, I don't think it's possible. And then the other people were looking at me like, how could you say this to the prince, right? And I said, and so then the guy, his assistant, repeated back to me. He said, the Crown Prince would like you to deliver this in this amount of time. And I said, well, I don't think it's possible. Once again, I started getting these wild stares, like I was, like I shot somebody or something.
The Crown Prince gets what the Crown Prince wants, right?
I said, this was different Crown Prince, but it was some years ago. And then when we did actually deliver and started delivering, so that required a lot of setup, because there was a lot of like sand storage, and I mean, we had to build out an entire infrastructure, so we couldn't do it after 2 weeks. But after we got the infrastructure set up, we were delivering something valuable literally every 2 to 3 weeks. So when they saw that, they were, it calmed people down quite a bit.
Nice, very good. Getting loads of questions. So Mike Levings has a question as well. So it's truncated again. So thank you, Mike, for another example. So he's answering Ghazi, actually. My answer would be to find a way to explain the value. It will invariably have to clients, or the decrement of not moving across before competitors do. So I think that's the same as what Tim is saying, basically. So I'm just saying here, kind of, it's that they probably heard from 10 different people with 10 different approaches, right? So that's very difficult to sell if you don't either have the reputation, or they haven't seen it before. Yeah, good point. Thank you. Daniel Dwan, he's a regular attendee on the show, and his one's been truncated. Well, no, hasn't actually. So he's saying culture is a reflection of top management's mental models, so we need to understand systems. Thank you, Daniel. Tim, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I definitely, culture is a reflection of the mental models and the structure, and so many other aspects of what kind of define culture, kind of the values. So if you look at something like the like the conflicting values framework. So you have a bunch of things that make up culture, and so that is and inside of organizations, when you have these when you have things like conflicting values, where you have, I've been in organizations where you have one group that wants to go really fast, right, and another group that's really careful and really governance minded, another group that's very secure. So and with when these things conflict, then the organization kind of suffers and doesn't understand kind of what do they want to optimize inside of the organization. So even when you're looking at a system, you still have to ask yourself inside the system, what do I want to optimize, right? So knowing systems thinking is great, but you still need to understand, kind of what the goal is of the organization, and sometimes the organization really wants to optimize governance, and that's their right. So if they're a particular organization, and probably the approaches I tend to use wouldn't work there, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. And Daniel is saying here as well, you don't change the system, you don't change the culture. So John Seddon would say that as well, because people kind of behave the way they get measured, and the measures tend to be a proxy for whatever vision or strategy happens, and that's where a lot of organizations get it wrong, actually. But I think there's also a little bit about behavior, but I think a lot of behavior is going to be guided by whatever way the system, whatever way the organization is designed. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. I was having a conversation today when we were trying to go through kind of some 5 whys analysis, and and one of the points that was made, the organization had some numbers, but everyone was working for their manager, because at the end of the day, they were being measured by whatever their manager says at the end of the year, and their bonus is tied to that. So they could care less about working across the organization as if their manager didn't approve it. So you definitely have where you have a structural issue, because how the measurement occurs and what people are judged by is governed by a particular thing. So people's behavior will be a reflection of that kind of governance model or management model that the organization chooses to use.
Yeah, I find that as well. I had a chat with Solomon last week, and he's well known in terms of evidence-based from Scrum.org, a useful framework. We might talk about it later. And we were talking about the devil in the measure. Be careful what you measure, because whatever way you think a human might abuse that is probably what's going to happen. So you need some kind of competing ones, I think. Yeah. We might talk about that later. There's a few more questions. So Matthew, he's a regular as well. And so the question here is, how do you renegotiate contracts like statement of work, master services agreement, to change or pivot from a waterfall to a more incremental delivery? So I had an example of that about 4 years ago. And often we think that procurement are the people that we're going to struggle with to try and get the contracts changed, if there's some supplier or whatever. I'm assuming there's some kind of supplier that you're involved with, Matthew, and that you need. There's probably a fixed price contract, and how do you change that to a kind of a more agile type contract? And so it was hilarious. What I did was I used Basvada's work at agilecontracts.org, and I weighed up all the different types of contract, and I kind of set on one that was kind of like combination of time and materials, but it was shared. So like we could still ask for, say, sick work or whatever, and if it took longer than that, they still get paid, but they get paid at cost. But if they were earlier, they'd still get their margin for delivering earlier, and we all benefit because you don't have the price of the staff or whatever. So shared pain, share gain was the one that I kind of liked the most. So anyway, I was talking to the procurement people in that company, and they were really keen, and so I made the change, and to make the change, I agreed with them, and they said, yeah, in this company we can now have those type of contracts. And when we were on the program director, he was not interested, nor was the supplier. The supplier was interested in keeping the work opaque and transparent. And if you're a program director, your CV is typically measured by how many people you have and how much budget you have. So Me coming in saying, here's a great way of being more flexible, it didn't go down as well as I thought it might have gone down, Matthew. And so I learned a few tricks that day that sometimes procurement aren't the people we need to worry about. Have you experienced that as well, Tim?
Yeah. So I was working with PwC. And they made their money. They made a killing on change requests. So, so when I was, when I suggested a different model, because the first time I did this was with the large government portal, which was I asked them to change the project to an operations project, believe it or not. So. And that operations project had a set number of things. You had to obviously operate, and then you had a set number of people, and then you had things that they wanted to do. So we just literally, it was initially a scope-based project. We changed it to an operations-based project by which we would operate this portal and do new development. And so that's exactly what we did. So I tried. So I tried to use the same model with another project, and then I found out that PwC was on the project, and they got paid by the number of change requests that were submitted. And I was trying to get everyone kind of on this agile contracts model. But similar to your point, when sometimes you're in there with another vendor. So there's a large. So the organization has not only your contract, but has other vendor contracts that they're managing, and you're trying to get them to change. And so when they want to change yours, or they want to change across the organization, other vendors will get mad. I saw this as well with Tata Consulting, same type of thing. We went in as agile coaches, trying to do a transformation across the. I think you've heard me mention it on the group, John. There's a guy, Mirza, here, and we went in to try to change the contracting model and the Social Security services or Social Security benefits organization in the entire country, and they were ready to change, but many of the vendors did not want to change because it wouldn't be advantageous for them in how they structure, kind of, because they come in low on the bid, right? So you underbid, and then they know that they'll get so many changes throughout the cycle to kind of even it out. Yeah.
It's a game. So I think it's tricky, Matthew. I guess trying to work with suppliers, trying to work with clients who want to work in a way where we can really pivot, turn very quickly, respond to customers' requests. And if we have parties who are not interested in that, and it's kind of be my cup of tea, say, in England, and I'd probably be less interested in that type of work. It's very difficult to change situations, to empathize, Matthew. You have a follow-up question, Matthew, as well, which again is truncated. Loads of examples, thank you. So how do you convince an organization that the current structure doesn't encourage their strategy when they've had structurings in less than a couple of years? They're fatigued now, but remain unconvinced. There's a lady actually gave me a joke about that, Tim, before you answer. She said that when you're a new CEO of a company, you receive three envelopes. And so after a few months, you can open the first envelope, you see. And so you open the first envelope, and it says, blame the last guy, you see? Or blame the last woman, whatever. So blame, okay, fine. So then you move on to another 6 months later, okay, I'm running out of ideas. And then it says, restructure. Okay? And then the final envelope is write three envelopes. I see it a lot, right? I saw it in companies: centralize, decentralize, insource, outsource.
Yes.
Yeah, I think when change is labeled as transformation, it can be difficult. If it's seen as like a project that's installed or something. Jokes aside, Tim, how would you deal with Matthew's question there?
So one of the things that I try to explain that is that kind of change. One is change is the new normal. So we have to get into this mindset that it's not to your point, John, it's not an installation. It might be an experiment. Okay, so
yeah,
you know, people are you know, based on what's happening in the world and trying to organize themselves, and especially when it's not they haven't thought it through well, and they sell it as something, because you know, a lot of change managers is about selling, right? So or being you know, the need or makes for the need. So that's one of the things I love about the LESS community, is that we're trying to move away from this term transformation, right?
yeah,
Because transformation is just, it sets the wrong expectation. You may find out that, you know, 3 months down the line that a particular thing isn't working, and if people have been sold over and over and over again, then they're not going to be you know, very happy about making it an additional change. So that's one thing I would say. And number two, I would look at running, you know, some sort of, I wouldn't even call it experiment, but looking at the organizational structure and do kind of a lot of causal loop diagramming, where you look at kind of what are the various options, and then you take some teams and make them part of a new kind of, unless a lot of times they call it parallel organization. I don't like that term, but where you take some teams and make them report under kind of a new structure. Okay.
yeah,
And so those teams reporting under the new structure, they start, you know, making those changes. And I wouldn't even say it's a pilot, because a pilot you can always turn back around and turn around.
yeah.
But you make them report, and then you start adding additional teams as those become successful, right? Like I said, my whole belief is the proof is in the pudding, right? So everyone can say their shepherd's pie tastes great, but you will only agree to it until you taste everybody's shepherd's pie, right? So when people actually see results and see actual change happen, that's when that fatigue, you know, because they'll talk to their colleagues and and they'll say, how's it going? And they'll say, oh, it's going great, or we had these challenges, but we overcame them, so on and so forth. So proof to people is really where it's at.
Yeah, I agree. I call that what you talked about, parallel universe, where you kind of set up a few teams and they've got different structure, different type of leadership thinking, and then outside it, I don't ignore the outside. I typically might bring an evolution journey or something, because if I just ignore them, by the time I come back out to look at them, they might be doing some water scrum crawl, and trying to take that out is it's hard work, right?
Yeah. Well, generally, when we go to a place, we're generally at least 3 levels of the organization. So generally, we look at the leadership level, and we look at the product ownership kind of structure, and then the engineering team. So that's generally how we split across whenever we're going to a client. So we make sure that we're not, you know, that it's not this opaque wall that we set up, but we, you know, and then we cycle through, you know, every day, literally at the end of the day, we cycle through, you know, kind of where things are and what's the pulse of the organization.
Yeah, sounds really good. Matthew, let us know if you think we addressed your question. Thank you very much for that. Saqib also has a question. So there are a lot of young entrepreneurs out there. We have seen many startups for the last couple of days whose founders are young, and then there's a follow-up. What's your suggestion for young entrepreneurs who have less experience?
Find a great idea and test it. So I would say, you know, every idea is testable. I mean, I know the startup I founded, you know, or co-founded with some people at Skillable, we without a product. Okay, so we found someone else's product and tested with that and combined different things together without writing one line of code. So so there are various ways to test out ideas, and I would say get with customers, see the problem, and test out your hypothesis over and over again. And as you keep going through that testing cycle, I'll just give this one example. I don't want to belabor this, but in Upskillable, we're an assessment platform. Okay, so in this assessment platform, we had a hypothesis, and that we wanted to build. So we wanted to build kind of a multi-dimensional hacker rank type experience, but we didn't know if it was going to work in Saudi Arabia. So we said, we will take someone else's assessment, and we will become like a recruiting company. So that's what we were. So we became a recruiting company for an organization that I was already coaching at, and then started recruiting for them. And then we take these assessments and then do these exports of the results and come up with these really cool visualizations about the results of this assessment. And so from that experience, we were able to understand what works and what doesn't work. And one of the things that one of your previous guests, Dave Snowden, always talks about and laughs about is these pre-hiring psychometric assessments. And one of the things we found out was that I guess we should have listened to him before, but that they were so just inconclusive that it was ridiculous, right? So had we taken that path, solely at the beginning, then we would have really been wasted a lot of money. So my point is just experiment, and get with customers and experiment with those customers.
Yeah, I back that up as well. Is that upskillable you're talking about, Tim? Is that
Yeah, absolutely. So so Upskillable is something I co-founded with two other people in Saudi. That there's a huge hiring problem here, and we were trying to accelerate the hiring process. And so we initially thought we could do that by giving everybody psychometric assessments, and it didn't go too well. I was working as the head of technology at one of the major government companies responsible for fixing employment in Saudi Arabia. One of the things that I found was that people were not hiring people were not hiring people because they had they had limited ability to interview properly. So because of that limited ability to interview properly, they would only hire people that were referred to them or they knew. So that exacerbated the hiring process. And so we were looking at trying to build something that would kind of give more confidence to the person to understand who they were actually hiring. So that was kind of the idea behind that.
You just reminded me of something, Tim. The guy that I follow, Patrick Lencioni, he wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and he did this TED Talk in March about the ideal team player, and he says he looks for humility, hunger, and people smarts. And they seem like really good qualities to me, but like how you measure them, I don't know. People trying the Hogan assessment, but I don't know, I'm not really sure that what came out as the readout for the assessment really reflected the people. But people who complained about it were considered not to be self because they weren't agreeing with the assessment. It's kind of the jury is out for me really on whether there's anything that can really help figure out the right person. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, we kind of pivoted a bit, but what I would say is that people are complex, right? So there's a lot of complexity with people, and focusing in only on the person will give you the competency of the person, but it won't give you the capability of the team. right? So
Yeah.
so organizations have to be about capability, because that's how generally the modern, especially technologically driven organization works.
Yeah.
Is that team value? Okay, individuals don't generally by themselves, even if they're really, really competent, they don't deliver value in a vacuum or by themselves. So practically, what we do is we try to give some insights, but our idea is that a complex or probably complex interview process is probably the way to go. So we never only assess personality, and it's not the first thing that we assess only. So first thing generally that we assess is probably cognition or ability and skills, so domain-specific skills. And then if those all fit, you don't use personality to choose someone. You use a bit of personality to understand who they are, just to how to deal with them, not to make an actual selection. And then you go through, an actual interview, and actually talk to the person, and then probably giving them some sort of challenge beyond just the specific assessment in the specific domain.
Thank you. There's a new trend I heard now where you have to let's say you apply for a job with a company, and then you have to fill out this video thing, like you get, and so a thing comes up on the screen what you're going to be asked, and then the question comes up and you have to answer straight away, and it's like a 2-minute recording or something like that, and then you submit it in, and so that seems to be the new way to figure out whether what kind of person you are.
Yes. A number of our we've seen it, and I don't like it very much. I don't like the approach very much, but we've seen it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same view as you. Loads of questions coming in, so I better start addressing them. So, good evening, sir. I'd like to ask, what is your take on traditional management-centric organizations, and is it still viable in today's growing awareness amongst young employees and tech-savvy consumers? So the conflict between the fixed thinking in the company and the younger, eager employees, and also the tech-savvy consumers. Tim.
Yes. So I would think, what similar to what most people would say is that a customer-centric organization, not management-centric, is the way to go. And these companies are going to tend to die out, right? So if people cannot, I always, and I like Kareem Harbaught's metaphor, where he asks, he uses the dinosaur metaphor. So I like that a lot. That the dinosaurs all died out, right? Because they didn't adapt. And so those companies that don't adapt, they will just, go by the wayside, and we see it over and over and over again. It's not something new. It's not, it's not a new phenomenon. Those companies that cannot adapt and cannot adopt management styles that are going to allow to get the most out of the potential out of the people in the organization, they're going to die, right? Because just if you think practically, a person making centralized decisions is going to be a bottleneck. So those and so there's going to be a point where that fails at some number of decision points, right? So if that's continually happening, then those organizations that don't have that will obviously move far beyond them from a market standpoint. So those teams that have the ability to interface with customers, those teams that have the ability to understand requirements for customers on their own by themselves in their own sphere of influence without going back to management, will obviously be able to make decisions on their own. That's why we keep saying self-management, self-directed teams. Why? Because they have to be able to make sound decisions on their own without having to go back to management. Right.
I had a eureka moment only a couple of years ago, Tim. I was I was showing people how to use delegation poker. It's like a management 3.0 thing. Like it's like
Yeah.
it's important, because you know it, right? The empowerment isn't delegated just for Sagar's benefit. It's not like but basically it's not on or off. It's like a spectrum, and depending on the decision, you find out how hard you are when you make a mistake. Let's put it that way, right? You are, but then you find out so I said, let's start with something simple. Let's what level of delegation applies for what decision to make at the daily scrum. Thinking to myself, it was a straight 7, full delegation to the development team or to the team in less. And our boss was at 2, which is sell. So he thought he had to sell to us what we should do every day. It's like, oh my God, this explained a whole load of things in the last year in terms of behavior. It's like, why didn't I do that earlier? So maybe check that out. It's like our delegation poker. Follow-up ones. Saleh. So agility is all about being able to adapt in uncertainty and growth mindset. How do you explain it, or are you thinking it's the right one? Do you mind if I take that one, Tim?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So, believe it or not, I don't start with agility at all when I'm talking to people about uncertainty. I start with Cynefin, the correct pronunciation, and I just explain complexity to whoever's, and they get to see. Check out the other live stream I did with Dave Snowden, and basically, if you understand that your work is in the space of unknown unknowns, I'm oversimplifying now. Maybe you can't have a plan. Actually, well, you don't know what you don't know. So, like, how the hell can you come up with a plan? So, when you just say to people, well, the traditional approaches kind of deal with stuff where you kind of know what you're doing. Well, here we actually don't really know what we're doing. So, why do you think I can give you a Gantt chart? So, just getting people to accept that, and then I kind of mix that with Monte Carlo probabilistic forecasting. I've got 2 shows on that. One with Try McGinnis and one on my own, where I explain that even if we're asking leaders to embrace uncertainty, it's kind of like it's like asking them to cross the River Thames in London without a bridge or without a boat. So I say, look, Monte Carlo, it's not perfect, but it's a nice way of saying I don't know. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I would try those. So I'll let you take the next one, Tim. Follow up, because sometimes introvert people, businessmen, adapt so slow and so calculative. Uncertainty I experienced. In that case, can we say that they're not agile? So it's interesting. Do you want to take that one, Tim?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know much about introverts and extroverts, and I don't know if that's just because I don't think that that's an introvert thing. I think it's people want to predict. Okay, so we live in
that's probably the priority. Yeah.
So we live in this world where they feel like they will lose control if they cannot predict, and there's heightened risk. So every person, you and I, we try to avoid risk whenever we can. When we go outside, we wear our seat belts. We do all of these things to avoid risk. So that's a natural human trait. So what happens though is that some people think that they control what they can't control. That's really the core issue, that when you try to explain that I'm a professional, right? So I always use a football metaphor, even though I only started watching football, or soccer as we call it in the States, since I came over here because of American football. But I try to use gaming metaphors, right? So when I was playing basketball, or people playing football, you can never know what the next move is going to be. You are reacting to whatever is happening on the in the field. You've been practicing. These are the best players in the world. So you've got Lionel Messi, and you've got all of these various people, the best people in the world, best players, and they cannot predict. Okay, so depending on the business context or the business environment or the problem you're trying to solve, many times you cannot predict, but people are still trying to, and that's where they're getting stuck. And even though they cannot predict, they still want to do these very predictive things, and so it's just because they want to avoid this risk of not knowing, but they actually don't know anyway. So it's kind of a false sense of sense of safety when in the reality, I tell people all the time, I said, I've been doing this 20, how old am I? I'm 46, so 25 years. I've been building software, okay? And I've never delivered anything on time. And they look at me like, what? You've never delivered anything on time? I said, no.
Yeah,
I've never, so I've never delivered anything on time. And they look at me like, how is that possible? I mean, didn't you have a due date? I said on time. Okay, I didn't say by the date. So on time means the same number of hours I predicted and the same number of people I predicted that we delivered on time. And I've never done it in my entire career. Never. So so it's just a false sense of safety or being able to predict actually what will happen. And there are a lot of negative consequences to that. And that's why for me, the trade-off of priority versus time is a real trade-off and a value-based trade-off.
Yeah. Something I do, Tim, that might surprise you. I've got this strategy called broad and deep agility. You recognize the deep and narrow from less, and then you got the breadth as well, which would have the other skin. So what I'm worried about is when I go deep into one area, and if I come out, then it'll be like the place will be destroyed or water's going to fall. So I need to do something to kind of contain the damage, so to speak. And when I come across people like this, if they might have genuine concerns, and maybe they are changing, and they might be the biggest challenge afterwards. But if I kind of get the whiff that these people will never change, I don't even waste my energy with them, to be honest. I just work with the people who want to do something nice and let them carry on doing the old thing.
And I'm the same. So, but I ask a few questions and you know, and then when I sense the massive amounts of confusion, it's probably game over. So
yeah, because we might as well spend our time with people who actually want to do this stuff, right? It's kind of more energizing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Got a few more. So Matthew said brilliant, and he said thanks, but I know there's a big long question coming. I see it down below, so we'll get to that in a minute, Matthew. So Stella has a question. Which approach would you recommend to a team member that is resistant to change despite the evident benefits to the organization? Do you replace the team member, or how do you deal with problematic team members who derail the rest of the team? That's a very good one.
I'll let you answer that one.
No worries. I can tell you some real examples. I had an extremely bad example where I was with a team one day, a team inverted commas, right? Group of people that hadn't called a team, right? And we were doing story mapping, we were kind of putting posters on the wall, back in pre-COVID and all that. And I noticed they were all checking their phones, I was like, I said, guys, gals, like, what are you doing? Like, why? I've stopped you 3 times checking your phones. Do you not care about each other's work? And they said, no. I said, okay, come back to me when you're a team. So that was a bad example, right? They did come back to me, actually, to be honest, and they did very well, but like they decided that they wanted to come to me imposing. So it's about invitation rather than imposing, isn't it? But I had another team then as well. Another team, and one of the ladies went on holidays, you see. She went back to her home country or whatever. And she was like a real champion. And some other guy got distracted as well, and he was a real champion. So it was like the US election, like the balance of power kind of switched a bit to the no-no characters, let's put it that way. They didn't even see the value in a daily meeting and so on. So they said to me, well, what do we do? And I said, quite honestly, I think some of you need to decide that you want to move forward, and some of you decide you're going to stay the way you are. And you're going to be in the same group, but maybe a few of you have a sub-team and you're going to try and do something good. And maybe that's some energy in. But they decided to do nothing, so I failed in that case. But typically what I was, if I kind of detected that there was like 2 speeds in terms of the willingness to go to agility, I would look at the membership of the teams and see, can we engineer a situation where the people who don't want to do anything, we kind of put them in a corner and just leave them do it the old way and just don't annoy anybody else and let everybody else move forward. a bit dramatic, but it's also, I think it's kind of respectful as well, because we're not kind of forcing the people who don't want to do it to do it, and the people who actually do want to do it, they can move forward faster because they're not getting they're not getting their enthusiasm dampened with wet towels, so to speak. A bit dramatic of an answer, Tim. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I've had similar situations. So but mine was more about us. So it was both. It was skilled, less. They were not skilled, honestly, and they, they were a bit on the fence about, doing something new, whatever it was. And so I've set people down and said, look, guys, whatever you want to do. Okay, so imagine in your mind that you just graduated from university, and someone's going to send you on whatever training you want to go on. You get to learn whatever you want to learn. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, what do you want to do? Okay, so some of the guys said, I want to be a developer, because they were not really developers. I don't know what you would call them. So they said, wanted to be a developer. Another wanted to be a security guy. Another one wanted to be a data scientist. So literally.
Yeah.
And I said, but after you decide, you have 1 week to decide. After you decide, we're going to take this path of you becoming the best at whatever that thing is, okay? And if you don't, you got to leave the team, period. I mean, you've got to leave.
Yeah.
So out of those people, now 3 of those guys are some of the best developers you'll want to see. One guy is a great data scientist, so, and 2 of them, one became, 3 of them left the team, and one became a sales guy. Another one became a portfolio manager, and another one, I don't know what specifically he's doing now. But my point is that you really have to, because the team itself, you've got to create that environment. And some people have not gotten the chance to learn. I'm very passionate about, hence the term upskillable for my company. But I'm very passionate about, giving people the opportunity to reset, to do like this reset that, in their careers because of whatever reason, but they've got to be committed to that. So, so that's kind of how I've dealt with it in the past.
That's nice. You kind of did a contract with them, and they signed up for that.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
Nice. I'm going to try that. I'm going to rob that idea. Thank you very much, Tim. Stella, let us know if we answered your question properly. Also, Salah, if you could let us know as well, and Sagar, if we addressed your questions as Sakib as well, let us know if we've dealt with it properly. Okay. So Matthew's got another one now. So he's got a couple actually. So I'll read it out because it's a bit chopped off. So sorry, John, Tim, another one. What's your experience with specialization in skills versus all-rounders in a cross-functional team? A bit outside development teams, what's your take on how specialization can work on a broad scale? And in other words, how can you get a team to think outside their remit? It's kind of a loaded question there. And there's a follow-up. And John, how do you create a parallel in an organization to prove a hypothesis? So we'll deal with that one later. So I'll read it again for you, Tim. So what's your experience with specialization in skills versus all-round cross-functional team?
Let's answer that part first. Okay.
Yeah.
So I generally sprinkle both of these inside of a team, and there's a reason, especially in our context here. One, we have things like translation and content writing that we put all inside of the team. Okay.
Yeah.
So that at the end of a sprint, we literally have we're ready to go. Because we generally deliver in dual languages. At least we have 2 languages that we have to deal with. So those people are all part of the development team. And so for us, it's absolutely essential to have kind of someone that can get their hands dirty in almost anything and won't balk at it, right? So we have people that are kind of business analysts / tester / you know, sometimes translator, sometimes content writer slash, you know, doing some mock-ups or working with our you know, kind of looking at, because we don't really have UX UI in the same way, because we kind of have a UI kit that we have that we use. So we have all rounders like this that just get their hands dirty in almost everything. Okay. And so we desperately need that, and we value those people as much as we you know, value the developers. Our developers usually, we don't have front end and back end developers. We kind of bulk at that. We have developers that either they either go kind of, you know, back, either they lean towards some sort of back end development plus DevOps. I mean, kind of server management and stuff like that, or they lean towards back end development plus some sort of front end developer. You know, so we have, quote unquote, kind of full stack, but generally they will lean in 2 or 3 particular areas. So they'll have 2 really great skills and a third kind of decent skill. And so that's generally how we handle it, and how, you know, most of the teams I've worked with, and probably the last 10 years, handled that type of dichotomy. And how do we? So the next one is a bit outside the development teams. How do you take on how specialization can work on a broad scale? I don't really understand that question. Do you understand that?
Kind of, yeah. I think the best example I can think of here would be the idea of a mentor and less. So you could have a number of teams, and you might have people who are picking up the next backlog item, and they don't really know how to do that work really, really well, but they really do their best to try. And if they struggle with it, they'll talk to a mentor.
Oh, the component mentor. Okay.
Component mentor thing, yeah. I think the one case where I don't have an issue with upskilling is if you're a specialist. I think as long as you're willing to mentor others, I think it's okay, because you are the kingpin at that thing or whatever. Yeah, I think there's room for both, Matthew. I think Tim is saying the same thing, really. You also have to be aware of the human factor as well, because do people want to do this? Which is why I love the idea of an consent from less as well, where you might train, I don't know, 50 people or whatever on what we're going to do next, or what we think we're going to do next, and we talk about, we do a little retrospective, and we look at the structure of the organization and so on, and we say, okay, this is the way we're thinking of going. And if 15 of those people decide they don't want to be part of this, I'm okay with that. Because for me, the price of agility is learning. You need to be willing to learn. You need to be vulnerable enough. You need to be happy enough to be uncomfortable to learn, but also you need to be. The quality of that is you need to be not judging other people when they're learning, and instead of saying, "Oh, Tim is not great at doing blah blah blah," Tim is learning how to do blah blah blah. So give him a break, you know, that kind of thing. So, but there are more gentle approaches as well. You can use Kanban, of course. I won't say start with what you do now. I wouldn't go as far as that, but there are ways to work around a situation where people generally just want to stick with what they're doing. Would you agree, Tim?
Yeah. And we've had this. I mean, so we had one back-end developer that he didn't want to do front end, and we just left it at that. And then he realized he was being, you know, probably, you know, a couple months later, he realized that he was idle for for large parts of the sprint, right? So so he started picking it up himself. So I don't like forcing people to do anything. I just don't think it's the right approach. I think you can encourage, and you can, you know.
Yeah.
I'm very much a team spirit type of guy, so I try to encourage the respect of other team members and helping and collaborating and cooperating. But if somebody doesn't, you know, if they haven't reached that yet, I try not to force people.
Yeah. Thank you. And Matthew, let us know if we've addressed your question there. And there was a follow-up question, which was, how do you create a parallel world in organization to prove a hypothesis? Well, first of all, there needs to be an appetite to try something radical, and the understanding that the organization is so far away from where you want to be that you might need to create a bubble for that, or bubbles burst. So be careful with the bubble metaphor, but you made a satellite or a little area of the company can try new things and do something radical and actually have different hiring policies and so on. And it takes a bit of a campaign. It can take maybe 6 months to get people to align how that might work. But it's a strategy that I like using. Other people prefer to just slowly take the bigger picture and just evolve that gently. I think I'm a fan of doing both at the same time, because I think when you do the parallel universe thing, it actually shows an example for the rest of the organization about what's possible, and it gets them a bit excited as well. And rather than them having to join the parallel universe, they might actually start their own little thing as well. So I think it's really about assessing the appetite for trying that. I hope that answers that, Matthew. Tim, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I just, one of the things I know some of the constraints that I run into here is that there's some board mandate that, even just to make those type of structural changes, they need permission from the board. So that's kind of constraining for large organizations. So I would definitely look at the organization type and what the constraints they're under when doing that.
Yeah.
Because I know one of the organizations I work with now, that's one of the key reasons why they still till today can't do it, because they have to literally go back to the board. It's like every time you change a particular reporting structure at a VP level, you've got to go to the board, and so that's just really difficult to work with when you're trying to experiment with something like this.
Yeah. And just one warning I'd say for Matthew as well is, if you do a parallel universe, try to make sure you don't nominate people into it. Give people a choice, that they let them to be part of it. I'm not saying you can't work with people. Sometimes it's a good idea to nominate, because maybe the culture isn't ready. Maybe people want to be told where to go, but usually better to create a situation where people want to be part of something new. I did a blog post recently on Scrum.org about exactly that topic, what kind of people I'd want to attract into that bubble. So it's my most recent post there, Matthew, if you want to check that out. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you, Tim, about another topic, which is measuring the impact of agility. So I've been playing around with a few models. I just want to share a couple of models with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
And then just talk generally, without getting into any details, because I did a whole show on measurement last week, okay. And we spent 2 hours talking about measurement. But there's one thing that a lot of people start with. I'm just going to make our faces a bit smaller while I do this.
Yeah,
that's okay. Sure. And I'll just spotlight this. So basically, there's a thing called the logic model from the Kellogg Foundation, and Joshua Seiden talks about this a lot in his Lean UX class. And you can kind of break up your measurements into these broad categories. And I found it useful to an extent, to a limit. Inputs in terms of what kind of people have you got, what have you got to work with, what money have you got, what budget have you got. Depending on your way of thinking, I consider customer feedback and end user feedback as inputs as well, but some people consider that as outcomes. So it depends on what way you look at that. And then you might have activities, how many story points do we deliver, to done, where you didn't actually deliver to done, it wasn't done, but you want to give yourself some credit. So that's activity. I'll call them BS stories. And I can guess what BS means, right? And then maybe number of people trained, number of training courses, but also activities. You could have the number of disciplined events. For example, if your footprint just had like Kanban, Scrum, and minutes like that, where they had dailies or something like that, are they having good days? dailies, for example. What's the quality of them? Are they right sizing or doing refinement, and so on and so forth? So not all activities are bad. I used to think before that measure activity, you get activity. But in one particular situation, measuring more fancy stuff, right? I was measuring outputs like how many items do we deliver to done? How many features do we deliver? How many releases do we have? How many increments do we have? How many X do we have? Stuff like that. And while that's still not outcomes, it was kind of like, it kind of gave you some hope. If you're delivering stuff, then, hopefully, if we check in with the consumer, the customer, the end user, we might check with them if they had any material change in behavior or they had a better experience. That could be a positive outcome or a negative outcome. Could have made the experience worse. We could have made it better. And then impact of the like more high level measures are really usually too difficult to kind of tie to a feature that you might have delivered, or if it's not a software team, if you're doing some marketing, you're doing agile marketing, you've got some campaign, it's difficult to tie in whether your particular advertising campaign actually increased the profit of the company. So impact would be like employee satisfaction, customer engagement, market share, things like that. So it's kind of a useful model. And often what I do is I create.
Why couldn't you predict the financial impact of a marketing campaign? I mean, if you've got conversions of some sort.
Yeah, you could. That's true. So you could that's an outcome. So like if the outcome had a major impact on the whole company, that outcome would be an impact. But in a lot of cases, if you're in a team and a lot of teams in the company or whatever, and those customers have a better experience, those customers are now happier. Is that still reflected in customer engagement overall? Maybe not, because maybe we've got some crap products as well, So it's kind of an interesting model. It's limited, but it helps you to kind of see what maybe you should be looking at. But there's a few gaps in the thinking here. My failure initially with this was that I thought, well, I measure how many things are they delivering and what kind of feedback are we getting, and we could actually check the cash, Tim. We could see the accountants are very good and they could actually see the effect on the bottom line, so it was kind of cool. But there was a gap in our thinking, which I'll deal with in a second. And for me, the big learning was sometimes it is a good idea to measure the number of disciplined events, because if the teams are delivering nothing, you need some hope that they're going to deliver something at some point. And I found a very high correlation between how disciplined the events were and outputs, and then essentially outcomes. Have you ever used this model, Tim, or do you use different ones?
No. So I've never used this model. It's interesting. I've never seen it, to be perfectly honest. But we have kind of a model where we have very specific things that are measured across the business. So if you think of, we have Scrum related things, and then we kind of have core business metrics. And so those. But this is quite interesting. So for a large company, I would imagine this is quite impactful. And it's one of the things that I recommended for one of the companies that I coach, where they actually measure the activities, because the activities were the quality of the activities were preventing almost anything from happening consistently.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I actually like that, and so when they were putting out their 2021 strategy, and I had that in there, and they said, so we just switched it to an operational instead of a strategic metric. We switched it to an operational. But the reason I wanted it at a strategic metric, because I wanted the board to really understand how kind of these are leading indicators to some sort of result. And if they don't take it seriously, then they they don't need to ask many questions, because if you can't consistently, so for me, consistent delivering, being able to consistently capture what a customer wants from a customer, right?
Yeah.
and then actually, dig a bit deeper into that, and then actually being able to deliver that at a regular cadence is kind of. I mean, for more advanced teams, that might sound silly, right? But for teams starting out, that really is critical, and without having certain things in place, they will never get to that. And one of the points that when we say there's no prescription in Scrum, it's kind of, especially here, it's kind of misleading. Because you have people taking all kinds of just really bad experiments that they're doing, and experimenting all the time, and without any rhyme or reason. So I think that's really important for more advanced teams. But for those teams that are having massive problems delivering any type of value, then they need to really kind of stick to the basics and set up some basic core automation and testing as part of the development, and being able to deliver, even if it's small increments, consistently and repetitively.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a great one, actually, measuring the number of experiments. Even if they're not successful, the more frequently we experiment, the more likely we're to have an accident of innovation, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. I'm just saying that for teams starting out, I wouldn't measure the number of experiments.
No, I wouldn't know. They might have a plumbing problem. Can't deliver anything. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I start off with the logic model usually. Usually have this debate about, I say, what's the least worst measure? Einstein said keep things as simple as possible. One always says, oh yeah, that's great, but we need to keep it as simple as possible. And you keep it simple, of course. People know how to game the system, pull that lever, I'll deliver lots of features and happy days and performing really well, right? So on assumption we're not doing that, there's another model called evidence-based management, which I spoke to Mark Noneman about last week, and it's very interesting, Tim, because what it does is when you look at the logic model and you say come up with and I usually use an idea boards to create the logic model, so people will make suggestions themselves about what they want to measure. But then what I do is I use it as a lens to figure out, did I miss anything? Yeah. So what I like about this is if our current value, and I use horrible metaphors, but the metaphor I use for that is are we milking the cow very well? The products, whatever we have, are we making lots of money? Are we doing well? Are we serving our current customers properly? Are they satisfied? And then there's time to market, which is okay, how quickly are we delivering? Okay, cycle time might be in there, number of releases or whatever. But what I used to find confusing about this model is they have ability to innovate on the bottom left corner. But that made a lot more sense to me when I renamed it myself as inability to innovate, because actually that's what it's about. It's what's slowing us down? Are we lacking you said earlier on when you wanted to do that project for the Crown Prince, right? Or is there some major impediment that we haven't resolved? I had two teams a year and a half ago, and they both had impediments that were 7 years old. 7 years old. So I kept escalating them, and they got pushed back down. You have been empowered. The problem solution has been delegated to you. You will solve it yourself. Yeah, right. And but the killer one here is unrealized value. So what money are we leaving on the table? Are there some unmet needs of the customer that we haven't dealt with yet? So Uber, as an example, isn't it? Airbnb, customer jobs to be done that people hadn't kind of satisfied before, but there were needs that were there. And a way you can capture that is typically through market share, but also by maybe this is where experimentation is useful, where you're not necessarily putting all your money on where you're making loads of money, because you could be like Nokia or BlackBerry, and we all know history, right? But you're trying to find the next curve, as Guy Kawasaki would say. I find that interesting, and on my website.
And how would you generally capture the unrealized value?
Usually through market share, because the market share is not just a zero-sum game. you can expand your share by expanding what your view of the market is in terms of what are you offering to the market. But also, I would say through experimenting new products, trying to discover, and most of them, by the way, will, as Guy Kawasaki says, you try to plant with 100 flowers, like one of them might actually take off. You know what I mean? So it's a bit risky. John Seddon, of course, he on the show a few months ago, and he's going to be back next week. He said people are all getting excited about unrealized value, but the treasures inside the building, we're delivering bad services to our customers, and so we should be, dealing with our customers properly in the call centers and so on. So people kind of get too excited about unrealized value, but it's something that can be ignored as well to your peril, can't it?
Yeah. But how? So you mentioned how you would understand it, but practically, how would you? What's an example of something you would do to calculate it?
It's not something that would be calculated. It's
Okay.
there are some questions that you would ask about, like, are you basically still just milking the cow all the time, just trying to produce new
Okay.
features for your existing products? Are you genuinely trying to find the next? I love what was that book called? $1 trillion Idea. Was it? I can't remember his name. And he was saying, and a lot of Google writers, they say they're looking for the next $1 billion idea. What's the next $1 billion idea? Or the next $1 million
Okay.
idea if you're a startup? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's more of like a mindset, really. It's like, rather than, there's a number that, there's no dial because we don't know. You could hit the jackpot or not hit the jackpot, couldn't you? So that's like interesting, like in terms of, okay, so you got the logic model, and then you can apply evidence-based management. So, that's all fine. And then usually what I do as well, Tim, I usually check how people are feeling. So I might be measuring how much stuff we're delivering and how much the benefit to the customer. But then just to check if there's gaming the metrics, because people, if they find out to be measured in a way, they'll
Yeah.
game it, right? So one of the things I do is I make sure I don't compare teams, I don't compare departments, I don't compare anybody. I just put everything into a blender, and either getting better or getting worse. But what I do is I'll go to the team or team of teams. I can see their last numbers because I was there the last. I literally visit them when we're doing the survey, and I ask them, does it feel faster than this time last year? Does quality feel better than this time last year? So I'm getting two senses of it. Like, I don't want to have data-driven decision making. I want data-informed decision making.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Because there's insights from the teams as well, aren't there, and from leaders about what's really going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the teams, you would certainly. I mean, so there's, as we always say, qualitative and quantitative, right? So
Yeah,
qualitative is absolutely coming from the teams and being able to understand, because like you said, you might be delivering numbers and just really not delivering much value to the end customer,
yeah,
and maybe ripe for someone someone else coming along and eating your lunch, right?
exactly. Yeah. So that's the worry. But there's still a missing trick there, because I check the practices, I do all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. I check how people are feeling, but really we also need to check how our leaders showing up, because in fact there were questions today about what way should we do that, and so I'm going to show you an example of a survey that I use, right?
Okay.
And I'll just show you level one. There's like 5 levels. I mean, for agility, there's no limits. Numbers are infinite, aren't they? So it's not like you're level 5, you're God or Muhammad or anything. You know what I mean? It's like it's so if I just show you an example, right? So I'm going to load up a survey for, say, the base level, because people were asking earlier on, what do you do with people, who are very fixed in their thinking and so on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually load up a survey and just show it on the screen, just to give you kind of an idea. Hopefully I can get this to work. Sometimes it doesn't actually work. Now maybe it can't actually. I'll just talk you through the questions, right? So the first question is, so what I do is I ask the people who are in team or teams of teams, and I say, think of one executive leader. Doesn't matter who it is. Don't write down the name of the leader. Don't write down the name of yourself. Just think of one executive leader, really senior leader, that's kind of within range. You can actually talk to this person, whatever. And then say to yourself, does this person make commitments on your behalf? Or are you able to kind of make your own commitments? So that's we call that like non-team commitments. So the teams aren't actually they're not actually making the commitments themselves. Some leader has some strategy session and then says Tim will do this and Matthew will do that and Stella will do that, and we didn't even consult Matthew, Tim, or when we're actually doing that. So that's a key killer question. And then another one would be in terms of how much information you need to make a decision. So think of that leader again, and does that leader need 95% information before they'll make a decision?
Yeah.
And that's a kind of an indication if the leader is like that. If the people who take this to consider that their senior leadership team are thinking they need 95% perfect information, then we have a bit of an issue where to talk about very, very basic stuff, probably talking about Kinevin, they probably even can't spell Agile, so talking about agility and embracing uncertainty and why, what you said earlier, for example, about a lot of work not being predictable, right? So kind of dealing with those things first rather than getting into kind of mad, crazy ideas like less, for example, which would be almost like level 4 and the kind of model that I'm using. Have you what is your experience, Tim, been with trying to figure out how executive leaders are showing up? When you go into a client and the teams you're doing great, you made your progress, you've demonstrated it. Now there's more people coming in because they love what you're doing. Does come a point when you hit a ceiling?
So kind of we have we do we do a lot of kind of 360s. So these 360s are around, and that's we talked about kind of one thing that Upskillable does, and that's kind of the pre-hiring type assessment, and that's really not probably not anymore the majority of our business. It's more so in kind of surveys. We've got psychologists that we use and are hiring on to onboard 2 more, and so we do quite a bit of kind of organizational, what's the right term, kind of organizational assessments at kind of the organization level across many different things, right? But from the leader's perspective, it's more so who they report to, who report to them, and their peers. And these are kind of so we do something kind of similar. If you've seen the stakeholder center coaching model from
Marshall Goldsmith. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So kind of something quite similar to that, with slightly different competencies, but because it's kind of agile directed, but it's very, very similar in approach. So we do a 360, and then we choose kind of specific areas for each one based on I mean, that's really exactly what Marshall does, but it's specific areas based on what the leader decides and based on what the recommendations of his stakeholders, which are the people that work around him or her. And so that's kind of how we do it. And we found that to be the most effective, just because that's really people's perception, and kind of perception as reality for all intents and purposes, because that's how the people are going to behave around the leader. So that's our approach, and then we just take them on the journey. That's why I said we have kind of 3 levels of the organization. So we have the leaders inside of the organization. When we say leaders, that's anyone that manages people all the way up to senior executives. and anyone who's so that gives us a lot of insight as to what kind of where the trouble areas are, systemic troubles that are in the organization that are really causing a lot of the problems in the organization. Because similar to Deming, we kind of believe that the system in and of itself, that the majority of problems in the organization are systemic versus individual.
Indeed. And I interviewed Marshall a couple of years ago.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, it's on my channel. He was very nice. He was. Do you remember he had this thing called the 100 coach applicants or whatever it was called?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I didn't get into that. I had no hope of getting into that. Like, it was like really top people in that list. But 16,000 in the group who applied or whatever. And I don't know, they just did some random selection, I guess, of 400 people. They said, and then 60 people end up in this 2 days in Salt Lake City, and so basically he kind of done everything that he knew, kind of thing. He was kind of passing it on. He said, pay it forward and so on. He was very, very generous. And at the end, he let everybody interview him. I just had a little stand for my phone with a little microphone thingy, and it's like the phone I had at the time. And he recorded interviews with one person after another. He was so generous with his time. And
he has a new thing called the Knowledge Philanthropy Project. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I was on a show last night. I wasn't on it. I was watching just like anybody else. It was Martin Lindstrom was on. It was brilliant. It was a really good show. He's really good. He's really tried to share his knowledge. But one thing he said to me is, we as change agents, we need to make peace with what the executive leader in front of us is willing to do. There's no point in us talking about go crazy ideas when the exec leader isn't willing to go there. It's a waste of energy, waste of time. And that's kind of where the leaders are saying that it's not about good leader, bad leader. They might be brilliant, might be very intelligent. It's just trying to get me to assess where they are from the niche view. And maybe I can nudge them up a step. But rather than getting excited talking about fancy stuff, that maybe I kind of pare it back a bit and talk about what they're ready to listen to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you read The Immunity to Change?
No, I haven't. Is it good?
Yeah, it's exceptional. It's really good. So if you've ever dealt with quite a few leaders that are not ready to make changes, it's quite a good book. I highly recommend it.
Thank you. I hope it's on Audible because I have such a queue of books to listen to. It's kind of convenient to listen to books sometimes. So.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's on Audible.
I'll check it out. Thank you so much, Tim.
No problem.
So we've been on now for nearly 2 hours, so it's almost time to wrap up. And I just want to check in with the people watching. People who are still watching us. Do you have any more questions? Any more comments for Tim or myself? And Tim, is there anything else that you want to talk about before we wrap up today?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that kind of that measurement piece. That was what I wanted. Those were kind of some of the questions I had for you. But I practically, in your work, and all of the various people you've interviewed, what has been kind of some of the key takeaways when it comes practically to looking at this product, what we started with, kind of this, products versus business agility versus, I don't want to say the word, but delivery agility, and just looking at all of this from from the cross section of the various schools and schools of thought, and thinking kind of where's your mind on all of these various kind of variants of how we look at agility?
I'm in the school of thought that even though some of the product management people hate the agile folks, there's actually a lot of value on the product management people are saying. Of their focus on the customer. That often gets lost. Now, very good agile practitioners will also be very focused on the customer. But often what happens is we get stuck in execution bias. We execute that plan that we agreed we should do 9 months ago, whatever. But actually, if we'd ran some experiments, you might discover that we shouldn't build that at all. But we've discovered something much better. So what I really love, I think what sums up for me as a sweet spot would be the combination of either Scrum or Kanban, whichever approach you like, with Lean UX. I think the two of them together are a beautiful combination where you get a mix of product management and Agile working together. So you're building, we're not just trying to learn new skills, we're trying to learn more about the customer and maybe discover new customers, customer discovery, product discovery. For me, I'm not sold on the lean startup because, well, I like the idea of the experiments and the validated learning and all that kind of stuff. What I noticed from experience is that lean startup teams, when they eventually validate that they've got the right idea, they've been so used to delivering with low quality because they were only doing cheap experiments, that they don't turn on that quality switch to flick over. And when I was at a Lean Startup conference a few years ago, I looked them all in the eye and I said, it was being streamed into London, and I said, look me in the eye and tell me that when you discovered that you had the right product and you had product market fit and there was a market, you had the right price and you were on the money and this is what you should do, tell me that you fixed the quality and that, tell me that crap isn't in production still. And all the heads went down. The crap was in production now. So what about the combination of Scrum and Lean UX?
So I think from my, I guess from my, strong XP kind of background, that's where I just can't, once we start. I mean, when we're building things, we have to build them correctly. I just can't. I'm certainly not one of those guys that I mean, for me, putting dead tables in production is just a no. So or dead code in production or anything. I just can't stand it. So that's certainly not my not my perspective at all. I just like the validated learning portion of it and the customer development portion of it, trying to find an actual market.
Yeah. I think so. I think you and I are both what I would call intricative agile practitioners, where we find the value, even though there's lots of people saying this is wrong, this is right, and all this kind of stuff. Complexity versus systems, for example, it doesn't matter. It could be. There's all sorts of people. There's value in everything. What everybody is saying, it's just trying to pick out the value, even though it appears that these things need to conflict with each other. Trying to find a way where they work there, because you know what, there's some value in each of the things that are on the market, and I think be a fool to just ignore one over the other. I think there's value in both.
No, absolutely. And what I don't know if you follow some of the comments I make on the group, but that's kind of what I'm trying to say is that, I don't know if you remember when I was talking about Scrum for X, but it's not really Scrum, but the iterative kind of, and then I changed it to, I think, was it Plan, Do, Check, Act, or Plan, Do, Study, Act. But the whole idea is that this iterative kind of learning and validating, they all share kind of this, kind of, they're all, I'd say, probably children or grandchildren or great grandchildren of kind of this iterative Plan, Do, Study, Act, by which you even if you look at complexity, right? So you're still have different modes based on the level of complexity. And how you approach, but you still have this idea of either acting or you have an idea of studying, or so from my perspective, all of these have some value and are highly contextual depending on the problem or situation.
Exactly. Yeah. The key thing for me is, apart from all of the stuff that we talked about today, the most important thing for me is that I actually understand what the client is trying to do. Even as recently as 3 years ago, Tim, I was making the mistake going in, particularly when I started working in non-tech, working with scientists or engineers or marketeers or whatever. Made the mistake of, you can try these are some of the options in terms of their mindset, but actually when I invested in learning about what they actually did, people teaching me about stuff that they did PhDs on, but giving me 45 minutes, I do my own research as well. If we understand what the client is trying to do, what problem they're trying to solve, then that's why we call ourselves chefs sometimes, where we kind of open the fridge. There's very few ingredients in the fridge. We'd love to do something perfect, but this is all they've got. So this is what we can do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And we go from there.
So that's where the agility chef comes from. Okay, nice.
Exactly. Yeah. So Emma Masala says 2 hours. Really, 2 hours. The time flies in these shows.
I was wondering how we're going to talk for 2 hours, but
there you go. And Matthew, a brilliant show, John and Tim. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for coming back. And Emma Sala says, lovely session. We traveled here with you guys. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Just one thing I just want to leave you all with. I'm doing some work on my website over the weekend, and already up there, I have something which I want to share with you. It's called Executive Hub. So if you go onto my website, which is called orderlydisruption.com, you'll see what I used to measure in 2019 in terms of how leaders show up and what I measure in 2020. And there's 5 different levels. It basically says 1 step forward, 2 steps back kind of thing. So it's not like judging people. And some of those questions I talked about feature, so it'll open up a survey monkey for each of those. And it'll give you a starter for 10. But there'll be another page on Monday called Measurement Hub. So a lot of the stuff that I talked with Tim about in terms of the Kellogg Logic model, evidence-based management, how it feels, practices, what kind of things you'd measure if you're using Scrum or Kanban or whatever, they'll be available as well. They're not the perfect set of measures, but it's a place where you can go and say, someone thought about this before. They've kind of gone through the pain of measuring for a few years, and this is what they came up with. And you can use it maybe as a base for consideration at least. So orderlydisruption.com, just check it out, and I'll be delighted with any feedback from anyone as well if you have any feedback. So Tim, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed talking to you.
I did as well. Thanks a lot, John.
Okay. All right, let's say goodbye to everyone. Thank you so much. Tim, you can stay on for a minute, but I'm just going to finish the live stream. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay.